Hello, and welcome back to Chasing Masculinity. Today, I am joined by Scott Sauls, who is an author and somebody who's built a career equipping leaders to become better. We talk about a lot of different things today, from the need for mentorships to not becoming a lazy Christian. So, there's a lot to listen to in this episode, and I'm excited for you guys to listen. With that, I will let you get into it. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today. You have been complimented as a great shepherd. Can you
Hmm.
can you explain what that means? What does that mean to you?
Well, I don't know if I necessarily live up to that compliment. Very kind of you to say, but a good shepherd is someone who uh, gives of themselves in order to care. And care is probably the primary word that comes to mind when I hear the word shepherd or shepherding. To care for those who are in need of care, who are seeking care, or who might not be seeking care, but you have an opportunity to lean in with care nonetheless. And so, a shepherd tends to burdens and helps others carry the burdens that they may have, often at personal cost to the shepherd.
Do you see a lot of intersection with what you're doing today?
A little bit. I work primarily with, besides writing and you know, releasing books and things of that sort. I work primarily with leaders who do pretty well at what they do in their work, and I think that most of the shepherding that I have the privilege of being involved with these particular leaders has to do with those areas of life that can easily get overrun or even sabotaged by a successful work career. And uh, those areas are anything from personal life in the area of spirituality or character or integrity to relationships, key relationships like marriage, family, friendship, things of that sort. So it's a different kind of shepherding than what's typical in, say, a local church context, but there's also a lot of overlap in terms of what the real issues are and the real needs are with the particular population that I serve currently.
So I think a lot of young guys would want to be in the position someday to maybe have some of those issues because it means they are a successful leader. So they want the issues that would come with having that position. So what are you seeing
Mhm.
as kind of the major issues or downfalls with the leaders that you're working with?
I think probably the main one, and I'm not sure how it gets solved, is that the typical leader who's doing well in what they do has as close to zero margin in their lives as you could imagine, meaning that uh, always going from one thing to another, very rarely having time to rest or to contemplate or to be still, because the schedule is so full. And uh, there are so many people, a disproportionate number of people who want a piece of that leader, which just squeezes everything in life. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, because if you have big responsibility, you're going to have a full schedule. And typically, in order to be in one of those positions of big responsibility, you've got a unique skill set, and with that, a unique responsibility of contribution. And so I'm not really sure what the solution is, but that is an observation.
There was a really big push probably around 10 years ago, started the whole idea of this maxing out your efficiency or your optimization and trying to multitask and just become the best at doing many things and having your hands in many buckets and being as involved
Sure.
and essentially having the least amount of time, free time as you can, because it means you're always so busy.
Yeah.
That was a really big thing and it's kind of fallen off now. I think people are realizing that probably wasn't the healthiest. Did that
Yeah.
perpetuate this issue?
I don't know. I mean, is that mindset something in the past, or is it still current? I mean, I hear the word optimization still a lot, and especially the group that I work with, a lot of them are middle age and starting to think about things like longevity. There's this huge longevity movement now of just various healthy practices, optimizing your physical health, your sleep, your emotional health, optimizing your nutrition. I hear that kind of talk a lot in my world, and so I'm not really sure it's a conversation, at least among the people that I spend my time with, that's a thing of the past. But optimization can become such a focus that it can actually de-optimize your stress life, because you're trying to optimize everything, and that makes you more stressed and unoptimized, and at least emotionally. So yeah, it's a pretty widespread conversation in my world.
You mentioned something I want to touch on. The idea of you can start optimizing all these things in your life for longevity. Like, I think that's becoming a really big, like, you can optimize your health is a big one. So you want to start workout regimens and tracking your sleep with an Aura ring or some sort of tracker in your steps. And you got to get red light and sauna and all of the things. Are you seeing, or is the things that are taking up a lot of leaders' time so that they don't have any other free time, is how much of that is actual requirements of the duty for whatever career or path they're in versus maybe more the self-inflicted but longevity focused sort of tasks or burdens on their schedule?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there are a lot of activities that relate to longevity. Like, for instance, one of the big ones for longevity is getting 8 to 10,000 steps a day. That's and walking instead of running. That's a good hour and a half every single day, which is a big chunk of time, and a lot of sort of longevity focused people are doing that. And then on top of that, a trip to the gym, which is, you add showers and changing your clothes and the workout itself. That's another hour or more. And so you're looking at a couple hours a day just on physical fitness, which feeds into emotional and personal fitness as well. But yeah, I think anybody who's focused on especially health optimization, it's going to take a chunk of time. There's no shortcuts there.
So I'm a big proponent of physical fitness and health and ensuring that is a part of your weekly schedule in some capacity. Is that something that, with you working with people who have too much on their plate, something that you would still recommend, something that's maybe not the fat to be trimmed off?
I would. Yes. I think it's other things. I think it's, unnecessary habits and acceptable addictions. Workaholism being one of those. But I think you can also get obsessed about physical fitness and give half of your day to it when you've got all these other commitments that are also important. But I think a good hour and a half a day on average is going to serve you well in every area of life.
So you're a dad, and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
new dad. So how would
Congrats.
thank you. How would
Mm-hmm.
you then talk to fathers to incorporate this sort of physical capacity into their schedule, or this sort of non-negotiable force they're taking care of their physical health into what I think most parents would say is a schedule that's already chocked full?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of it depends on how old your kid is. Because when they're little, they're chasing after you for time. And when they get older, you're chasing after them, hopefully, especially when they hit the teen years and they become more independent and they get the car keys. But I think in your stage, if you've just had your first child, it's all about consolidation. You know, your 10,000 steps, you got a stroller in front of you now, meaning you look for opportunities to do things together as much as possible. And maybe that's you giving your wife a 1 hour break by, strolling the kid around the neighborhood so she can get some rest, and some, some alone time. Or maybe it's everybody, going out together as a family, but moving together. So that's one way you can do it. Another is the divide and conquer approach, where a mom and a dad, trade off with time with the kid and and things of that sort. But typically couples figure out what their rhythms are and what their schedules are and how to negotiate, continued movement while bringing the kid along as much as possible. That's what I would say first if the kid's really young. But the older they are, the more you want to think creatively about how you get involved with the activities they're interested in. And so, I got some friends that were never runners, for example, and they became runners as soon as their teenagers started getting interested in cross country or, running a half marathon. And suddenly, mom or dad became a runner as well because it was an opportunity to do something together and meaningful with their kid. So,
That's really good advice. So I
hmm.
want to go back in time. You're somebody who says you work with a lot of leaders, successful leaders, and you're equipping them to do more. How did you get into that? What did that background look like to get you to where you are now?
I spent 30 years leading churches and which larger churches especially are sizable organizations. The largest staff I've ever led was 85 people, which is more than most small and mid-sized businesses. And a lot of, the administrative principles apply similarly in a nonprofit as they do in a for-profit world. Um, but in those contexts, I've always gravitated toward leaders, and so what I'm doing now in a lot of ways is a consolidation and continuity of that. Um, so so yeah, it's just kind of the natural next thing. But yeah, for 30 years, I in many ways was already doing what I'm doing now. It's just a lot more focused and targeted.
Hmm. Was there a turning point when you realized you were maybe more drawn towards the building rather than just the doing, or more towards the thinking and planning side of things?
I mean, it's a good question. The first thing that we did out of seminary was start a new church, which is all about building and kind of employing entrepreneurial leadership skills to pastoring. And then we got involved with another church plant after that, relocated to a different city. So we did it twice, back to back. And then we were invited into a very large church in New York, where it was more maintaining and refining what was already there, to ensure that we were stewarding something that already existed. And then when we moved to Nashville from that place about 14 years ago, again, it was an existing church and an existing community, and my job was to, um, you know, was to lead the building and creating of environments that enabled that community to flourish and grow and to expand. And so, very different skill sets. I think that I'm probably better suited for taking something that exists and making it more beautiful as opposed to starting from zero. I'm just much more wired as a reformer than I am as a starter in some respects. And yet what I'm doing right now, we started from scratch. And so, in some ways, I guess I'm being a little bit inconsistent in saying that, but I'm a lot more comfortable. That's probably a better way to say it. I don't know which skill I'm better at, but I'm a lot more comfortable in taking an existing thing and building on it. But so far we've gone where it seems like the Lord is taking us, and it's worked out okay so far.
I feel like a lot of people that are doing something similar to you are in the secular world. Do you feel like there's any sort of like head bashing between where you work primarily with churches, or you're a very Christ-led man first, and you've worked in the non-secular world? Is there contention between those two worlds?
I hope not. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for Christians to enter into, as opposed to separating themselves from the world of work and entrepreneurism and development and building and innovating and creating and fixing things. I think that it's an incredible opportunity, just the world of work, the world of vocation. We have a basis in biblical theology tracing all the way back to Genesis and also throughout the New Testament about the work ethic that the scriptures encourage, and also the reason behind the creativity and the restorative impulses that we bring to our work. It's that we worship and we follow a God who's creative and who in the beginning created everything and called it good, and also we worship a savior who came into that world after it was broken and was falling apart because of the fall and because of sin and suffering, and inaugurated a mission to make all things new. And so, those impulses are I think it gives Christians an unfair advantage that we actually have a reason, an existential, eternal reason to be creative and to be restorative in our work and to do our work with all of our hearts. And one of the applications of that is it's utterly inexcusable to be a lazy Christian in your work. There is no theological basis whatsoever for that. Rest deeply, yes. Take your Sabbath. Have faithful work-life integration that allows for hard work and deep rest and all the rest. But when you're working, do it with all your heart, or on some level, you're betraying your calling. Whatever you're called to. And I love what Martin Luther, the great reformer, once said. He said that the humblest sweeping maid, sweeping for the glory of God, is infused with as much dignity as the greatest preacher in the world. I think that's true, and I think that gives a reason for Christians to believe that there's deep meaning to every kind of work that we're called to.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk more on the lazy Christian and elaborate, or what is a lazy Christian and why should we not be pursuing that life?
A lazy Christian is a person who is given a task and decides not to bring their best to it. We raised our daughters. We never, ever, ever put pressure on our daughters to be the best, but we were always talking to them, as students, or the way they clean their room, or the way they contribute to the projects, the group projects that they were part of in school, we said, as Christians, we're called to bring our best. And so, there's a parable that Jesus talked about of the talents, and he said, the person who's given 3 talents is expected to produce 6 when it's all said and done, and the person who's given 10 is expected to produce 20, and the person who's given 1 talent is expected to produce 2 at the end. And of course, he's not creating a mathematical equation as much as he's saying, do the best you can with what you've been given. And so, let's, how tragic would it be? Okay, okay, in the who's a better basketball player, Michael Jordan or LeBron James? I'm squarely in the Michael Jordan camp. I know that might betray some of your readers who never got to watch MJ play live. But Michael Jordan is the best basketball player of all time. But even if he wasn't, and even if LeBron was, what a tragedy it would be if either one of those guys took the raw talent that was given to them and only half invested in it. And they were satisfied with being somewhere in the middle of the pack when they had the potential to be the greatest of all time. How tragic would that be? And in some ways, it would be depriving the rest of the world of the awe and wonder of what they actually have the ability to do, and the way that they have the ability to inspire like nobody else does, that's built into them by God. How tragic would it be if they only went halfway when they had the potential to be who both of them have become by being 2 of the hardest working players in the history of the game. And so, bottom line, whatever God's given you to do, give it all you got, man. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose by doing that? Just don't turn it into a workaholism addiction. Know what the boundaries are, but within those boundaries, give it all you got, and get the education you need, and apply yourself to the degree that you need to, not to become the best, but to become your best. That's what the scriptures say. Whatever you do, do it all to the glory of God, knowing it's the Lord Christ you're serving. For some people, that's going to be turning 1 talent into 2, and for others, it's going to be turning 10 into 20. And the great thing about that parable is both get the same reward. The one who turns 1 to 2 and the one who turns 10 to 20 both get the same reward from Jesus at the end, because it's about the investment and the heart that you put into it, not as much about the outcomes.
What would you say to the struggling Christian who's trying to find that boundary between not being lazy but not becoming a workaholic?
I would say get mentors. Find somebody that you look up to who's about 10 to 20 years ahead of you, or maybe get 2 mentors. Maybe get what are you, Gen Z?
In the middle, gray area, sure.
You're in the middle? So
Yeah.
Gen Y, Gen Z, thereabouts?
Somewhere between.
Okay.
I think, unfortunately, I'm a Gen Z.
Yeah, so find a Gen Xer and find a baby boomer and ask them that question. What do boundaries look like for you and for your generation? What are the blind spots that you've been made aware of in terms of your work life? If you could go back in time, what would you work harder at? And if you could go back in time, what would you let go of? And see what they say. Wisdom is gained in community, and wisdom is gained through asking those kinds of questions to people that we trust and look up to. A good place to find that is in a good, either intergenerational church or some other intergenerational situation where you put yourself in proximity to people who have a little more life experience than you. And hopefully in that experience, you'll also discover that people who the more mature people who are ahead of you in life are going to want to learn from you and your experience too. So it's a two-way street. It's kind of a two-way mentoring.
Do you have any suggestions or any sort of blueprints for somebody who, let's say within the church and then outside the church to pursue a mentor, how would they go about doing that?
I mean, yeah, I could be radical here and say, if let's say you're a 25-year-old, recent graduate of college or graduate school, you're just getting started in your life and your career as an adult, and you've been dropped in, some town in Canada or in, the US or England or wherever it is that you are, and and you're part of a local church. What would stop you from saying, okay, I'm gonna do the young adults group, but on Tuesday nights, but on Sundays, I'm gonna sit in the midlife adults, you know, Sunday school class or community, or I'm gonna park myself in the section where the midlife adults sit, so I can start building some relationships there, so that you've got, you don't want to lose your peer connections, your same stage of life connections. That's an important part of life, no matter what stage you're in. But to just strategically and thoughtfully position yourself so that you have opportunity to have that cross generational interaction, and that could apply to other things too. Putting yourself around people from different cultures or different economic situations or different nationalities. There's all kinds of ways we can enrich our own perspective and contribute to the enrichment of other people's perspectives by putting ourselves in settings where we have the potential of building relationships with people who have different experiences than we do.
Something that I know my wife and I found very helpful throughout our entire relationship at every stage, dating, marriage, pre-family, creating the family, was
Mm-hmm.
putting ourselves, one, in a community that had this, but finding people that are in that immediate next stage of life. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
single, it's someone who's in a relationship. Like you're in college dating
Mm-hmm.
somebody. If you're in
Yeah.
college dating somebody, it's somebody who has a very serious relationship. If it's,
Yeah.
you've been dating for a few years, it's somebody who just got married or is engaged, and it works its way all the way up until it's kids are out of the house. And so finding a community that had that just immediate next stage, is that something where should mentors be several stages ahead of you, but the trajectory you want to go and the peers and people you're around be the next stage of life, or can you find mentors in that immediate next stage of life as well?
Oh, I think the next stage of life, they're still energized by the last season that they were in, and their memories also fresh, and they're closer to your generation and the culture that you're growing up in, and so you're going to get a lot of good feedback to people who are 5, 6, 8, 10 years older than you are, not to the exclusion of those who are much older than that, but by any stretch, but yeah, both and for sure.
So I want to get back to talking about leaders and you helping leaders, and I would describe it as you're somebody who helps doers do more, or you're developing this sort of leadership ability, or the ability to hone in skills. What does it look like, or what could you speak on to enable a doer to do more, whether that's a church leader or secular?
Yeah, that's actually not my focus. I mean, I if anything, when I'm done working with you, hopefully you're doing a little bit less, and you're doing what you do, and you're doing what you're doing healthier and smarter, um, and you're accomplishing more in doing less because you've learned to delegate and you've learned not to be the hero and the savior who has to, be in on every decision and be in on every project directly. You've actually developed the skill of mentoring and of delegation and of trusting other people and empowering and training up other people, which most skilled leaders have those skills already and are practiced in that. I just want you to be healthy in all of that. And so that's really been my focus. My focus is more on your faith and your character and how you show up in the different relational environments God's entrusted to you, um, and just believe, I'm a firm believer, the healthier you are, the more effective you're going to be, and that's going to be the byproduct.
Have you heard of the book Essentialism?
I have.
Is that the approach that you take when working with people?
I candidly, I haven't read it. I have the book. I've heard of it. I've had it recommended to me, but I haven't read it yet.
Hmm. So the idea, though,
So
that
I can't comment in an informed way. So I'll flip the question back to you. What do you think?
well, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. And also, I
Mhm.
say that also having it on my bookshelf to read and have not read it yet.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But conceptually, it sounds like that's kind of the path that you take to
Mhm.
help people is to, would it be optimization, prioritization? What would you describe that as best?
Maybe more prioritization.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So what would that look like? Let's say you're a mid-20-year-old, you're getting going in your career path, you're getting involved in a community, whatever that looks like. But you're
Hmm.
starting from square one. You're not top of the corporate ladder. You're not leading a church. You're not, you're at the bottom of the totem pole, if you will. How can you put in those practices now?
Um, Again, I think just going back to Jesus's parable of the talents, and take what you've got and give your best to it. And typically, the people who do that are the ones who get asked up and invited up.
Mm.
And um, be careful not to wish yourself further along than you've earned the right to be. That would be another one. You know, every now and then, have a conversation with, let's say a fresh college graduate, and uh, they don't understand why they don't have their manager's job yet, or why they aren't at their manager's level yet, and don't stop to think that there's actually nobody their age and level of experience that is at their manager's level yet. You got to put in the work. You've got to prove yourself not only capable, but also hardworking at one level before you can expect to be asked up to the next. Um, there's, they talk a lot about participation trophies where, certain parenting philosophies and educational philosophies have shifted. And it's a pendulum swing, right? Because I think the baby boomers, they're the older generation in their world was really hard on them and very demanding and raised the bar really high. I mean, Michael Jordan's a baby boomer, right? And his relationship with his father, not that great. Is and it's documented in the documentary. His father was, a hard driver, very demanding. Andre Agassi, the tennis player, very similar story. That's not good. But because of that kind of heavy-handed parenting, a couple generations later, the pendulum shifted to a more permissive, soft, non-accountable, no discipline kind of approach. And what you ended up is soft, fragile kids. And then they get out in the workplace and they're utterly shocked that there's this thing called accountability and job expectations. And yeah, if you don't perform what's on your job description, there are actually consequences. And we're certainly not going to pay you more or give you bonuses or promotions if you can't even do your own job description. And sometimes the person on the receiving end of that conversation is shocked because they've been raised up and trained to believe that just by existing, they're entitled to things like promotions and advancement and accolades and pats on the back. But when you get into the working world, especially if you're in the business world doesn't work that way. It's a you get rewarded for your hard work, and you don't get rewarded for your not hard work, and that's the way it is, and that's probably the way it should have been when you were growing up as well. Um, but within a healthy framework, right, and within healthy boundaries, and so a lot to say about that. My generation. workaholism was the problem, overwork was the problem, and maybe younger generations in certain situations would have more of a challenge with underwork. And like when you go into a job interview and the first thing you ask about is PTO and vacation, that's not a good signal to send to your potential future boss. Ask about the job first and get to PTO and vacation at the end when they're ready to offer you the job, and no sooner than that. Would be my advice.
So do you think that the whole lazy Christian is more of a younger generation problem?
No, I don't. I don't at all, because I'll also say this. Among millennials and Gen Z, I also see some of the most creative, hardworking, innovative, entrepreneurial people that I've ever seen in my working life. I would say that if every generation has a unique vulnerability, the unique vulnerability of my parents' generation and my generation, the unique vulnerability of my parents' generation is workaholism. The unique vulnerability of my generation is cynicism. The unique vulnerability of generations younger than me is taking God's 6 days of work and 1 day of rest equation and turning it into something more 50-50. And even wanting the job to feel more like leisure than it feels like a job. I think that's a vulnerability. But it's also a stereotype and not something that characterizes an entire generation. And I think that's across the board. I don't think all baby boomers are workaholics either. And so, I think just every generation has a characteristic generational value system that not everybody in the generation embraces. And so it's just, it's kind of the generational air that you've been given to breathe, and you've got to decide, what part of that air you're going to take in and what part of that air you're going to avoid. And that applies to my generation and every other in different ways as well.
So if you had to pick like a intergenerational dream team of the best traits from each generation, and then be able to apply that to the ideal modern workplace man, what would that look like?
Michael Jordan's passion for excellence. I'll just stick to basketball. Michael Jordan's passion for excellence. Steph Curry's, Steph Curry's ability to recreate the game in a different way than MJ did. And I'd put Kobe Bryant in between those two. And then I'd add Cooper Flagg to the latest version of that. So all four of those changed the game, changed the way it was played, changed the model that you look up to, changed the kinds of shots that you will and won't take on the court, changed the kind of defense you play. All of them changed the game in their own way, and elevated it in their own way. So that's an example I'd give, from the basketball court. That would be my dream team. I guess I need a fifth player. Not sure who that would be at this point, but maybe Larry Bird, who came before Jordan, a little bit before Jordan anyway.
So what would be the traits, if you could pull from each of those, that would create the well-roundedness? You have Michael Jordan's passion, maybe Steph Curry's creativity and modernness of changing the game.
Yeah, Steph Curry's got time for golf. MJ waited until his basketball career was over before he started playing golf, which might point to maybe a younger generation value of a better balanced life with hobbies and interests and things like that. But man, I would say, if I just applied it to the generations, the boomers gave us a strong work ethic, and the Gen Xers give us, let's say, a realism, and say the the next generation after that, Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, um, you know, valuing relationships and valuing important things like rest and leisure and play. And I think the younger you get, too, creativity. I mean, just looking at what your typical teenager can do with a MacBook is incredible, and in many ways is more than my generation could do with 20 years of education. It's incredible how much creativity is coming out of an entrepreneurial drive is coming out of younger generation. So I would put all those together, and you got a pretty complete package there.
Sounds like great things to learn from mentors from each of those generations too.
For sure.
Awesome. So I want to move into some rapid fire questions with you, if that's okay.
Hmm?
What is one habit that builds this action taking?
That builds what action taking?
We talked a little bit earlier about people taking that first step, especially the lazy Christian. What would be one habit if you had to build one that would allow you to take that?
Finding a mentor and getting with them once a month. And the agenda is you bring your questions and they bring their wisdom.
What is one mistake that people make when starting something new?
Not doing research, diving in, letting eagerness, lead you to dive in before you know what you're doing.
What is one thing that separates the consistent from everybody else?
Perseverance, a willingness to push through the down seasons, and to trust that you're part of a process here that ebbs and flows, and not hitting eject the first moment that something gets difficult, and realizing that the difficulties are actually a part of the process that's forming you most. That we grow, our character grows, our character develops, our skills develop, not when we're crushing it, but when we're not. That's when we develop the most. And so, learning to value setbacks as educational opportunities.
How much does faith play a role in that?
I mean, for a Christian, gratitude when things are going great, and a non-entitled, humble spirit when things are going great, and a spirit of receptivity and learning and curiosity when things are challenging.
Mm-hmm. All right, last rapid fire question. What has been your biggest motivator?
I mean, since I was about your age, maybe a little bit younger, Colton, Jesus, and wanting to be a good, faithful citizen of the kingdom of God. Living in response to the grace that has been given to me freely.
Have you seen that? It's a bit of a side tangent question. Have you seen that develop over the years as you've maybe matured in your faith and matured in your career and adulthood?
What's interesting is development as a Christian is like no other kind of development that I've ever seen or experienced, because the more mature a Christian gets, the further they realize they still have to go, and the more unfinished they realize that they are. I mean, the Apostle Paul is a great example. Early in his ministry, he called himself an apostle. Later in his ministry, he called himself the least of the apostles. Later, he called himself the least of all the saints. And at the end of his life, he called himself the chief of sinners. And that's not because Paul's character was getting worse. His character was getting better. But his awareness was also growing of the gap between the holiness and the beauty of Christ and where we are at any stage of our developing unfinished selves before he takes us home and makes all things new, including us. And so maturing as a Christian is a curious thing, because the more you mature, the weaker you feel, not the stronger. And yet in many ways you are stronger, and your character is better. But you still feel that need of needing Christ more and seeing how much further you have to go.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. The weaker you feel, it's because the less reliance you put on yourself and the more you put on Christ, which actually makes you stronger. But you feel weaker because it's no longer within you.
Yeah.
Would you say that is, if someone's going through that, experiencing that, or rather maybe they're not experiencing that, that's a sign of wisdom, or a sign of maybe not gaining in wisdom as your maturity progresses? Would it be maybe a better question? Is that a sort of litmus test for as you move through your faith?
Yeah, I would say the more our self-understanding looks like the self-understanding of the Apostle Paul toward the end of his life, or the understanding of the Apostle Peter when he witnessed Christ hauling in the catch of fish and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." The more aware we are of those realities, the more poised we are to receive and enjoy and savor the grace and love of God that comes to us through the finished work of Christ. And so, yeah, it's definitely a sign of maturing. And if those realities aren't on my radar, what am I doing?
Well, I think that is an incredible place to end. Scott, this was incredible. Thank you so much for joining me today. Tell the people, what are you working on? What do you got going on?
Oh, I'm releasing a book 2 days from tomorrow called The Mercy King. And it's my seventh book, and the first one I've written about directly as this, about the person and work of Christ. So whole point of the book is to convince people that God really loves them as much as he says he does, and to get what we know in our heads down into our hearts. And so I hope it has that effect.
Wow. Where can people find the book, and where can people find you?
I can find the book Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the usual suspects, and you can find me in Nashville, Tennessee, and you can find me on my website at scottsauls.com, and that'll give you links to everything else.
Great. Well, I will make sure to include all those links in the description too, so people can find your book and find you. I want to thank you again for joining me. I think you have so much wisdom to distill, and it's been great talking to you. And I want to thank everybody else for their time and attention, and I will see you all in the next one. Before you go, I want to mention something briefly. If this podcast has been resonating with you, if the conversations around discipline, purpose, identity, and what it means to be a man today have been hitting close to home, then my book, 24 Rules of Masculinity, is officially out. It is a direct Practical guide built around the same principles we talk about here: biblical foundations, hard-earned lessons, and clear direction for men who want to live with intention instead of drifting. This isn't theory. It's meant to be picked up, applied, and just carried with you. So whether you're just starting to take ownership of your life or you're trying to realign and get it back on track, that's why I wrote it. You can find 24 Rules of Masculinity on Amazon or through the link in the description. If you do pick it up, I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.